Welcome back. How did it go? Did you give yourself the opportunity to really tune in to some of the sabotaging thoughts that don't want thoughts that would just come up automatically as if it was on autopilot? Did you give yourself permission to really tune into some of maybe the other sabotaging elements and thoughts about your life that may be getting in the way of you getting what you want? That was what you were challenged and assigned to do, for lack of a better word. Now, it may have seemed very simple, and I want to preface this whole thing with this. The principles that we share with you are very simple. They're really very simple concepts and principles. The depth that you go is up to you. So something very simple can be a very powerful tool for your life. Before we get into what you discovered, let me ask you this. How committed are you? Are you committed unless there isn't the time, unless it isn't convenient? I'm committed if. Well, I started to watch it, but I already know these things and I've heard them before, and it seemed like repetition. I'm committed if it conforms to my belief about how it's supposed to look. I'm committed if it is interesting enough to grab my attention. I'm committed, but, watching a video is hard for me. And it was a little boring. Well, let's just stop right here and ask, what are you committed to? Are you committed to take this on if it's entertaining? Because let's just put it out on the table. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm not going to juggle balls. I'm not going to spin plates, do magic acts for you. I'm here to support you in getting what you want. So if you're looking for entertainment, there's a lot of things and a lot of places you could go to be entertained. We're not here to create a convenient training for you. Doing it online is not about convenience for you. We do it online because it's time to reach a broader audience, a bigger audience than I've reached ever in my life. I'm committed, but where's your commitment? What are you committed to? On the other hand, if you did engage in this process, what are you learning? What did you discover? What did you just see? Did you notice that you have some self-sabotaging thoughts that you weren't even aware of? Did you notice that they seem to just come up automatically and they seem to just pop out of anywhere? And they come up far more frequently than you might have imagined. What did you notice as you engaged in this process? Did you write things down? What were some of the biggest things that came up as far as what you don't want? And notice, was it something that tied into maybe an emotional pain or a fear of loss of money or relationships, such that you may be subconsciously sabotaging those very things that you would say you want in your life? What did you see? What did you discover? See, the exercise itself is really very simple. It's not meant to be complicated. But for it to work, it requires your engagement in it. It requires a conscious willingness and engagement to actually not only go through it, but to learn something, to get something out of it. I don't really care that you do it. I don't really care how you do it. What matters is, do you learn things? Are you engaging in it such that you start to shift to see that maybe you're more powerful, even powerful enough to sabotage your life and you don't even realize it? That doesn't mean you haven't reached a level of success, but could there be a greater success for you and you're missing out because of these self-sabotaging beliefs and conversations that go on inside of you? So what you're going to be engaging in this whole training is, in a way, it's like learning a new language. And if you've ever learned a foreign language other than your native language, at first the process seems a little tedious. Years ago, I had the opportunity to learn Spanish. At first, it was very tedious. At first, you learn some of the vocabulary, and it takes a while. You learn some of the sentence structure, and it can seem very boring. And then when you go out to engage and speak it, first, when you want to think about what you want to say, you have to translate it from English, or I had to translate it from English to Spanish and hope that I got it correctly, which a lot of times I didn't. Then speak it, and hopefully my accent is enough that they could understand it. Then, as somebody would repeat back to me, I would have to translate the Spanish to the English, and then think of what I wanted to say and translate that English to Spanish and then say it. And so it was a very laborious process. And for a while there, I thought, I'm just not getting this, because it was tough, because a lot of people spoke very fast. And it took me a while to get it tuned into that. It took me a while to translate something. Sometimes I didn't know how to say what I wanted to say. But over time, the process was accelerated. Over time, as I started to learn, it started to become more natural, to where there was a point where I found myself not only speaking it fairly fluently, but thinking in Spanish and even dreaming in Spanish. It started to become a part of me because I'd immersed myself in it. So it went from being laborious and tedious to something that came very easily. So that's what we're engaging upon here. So as you look at the things that you discovered about what you don't want, now what? Where do we go with it? Well, we're, in a way, learning a new language, or we're translating now. We're going to start to translate that. So as you take what you don't want, maybe one of the things you came up with was you don't want to lose friends. Well, how do you translate that? How do you turn that around? How do you shift that to support you in focusing on what you do want? Focusing on what you do want, such that in learning this new language, you're going to learn it such that it starts to become a natural part of you. So rather than the other one coming up on autopilot, this is the language that starts to come up. Your thoughts and your words are the words and thoughts that throw out an energy that supports you in getting what you want. So maybe one of the things you say is, I don't want to lose a relationship. Okay, well, what do you want? How would you turn that around? Well, it doesn't mean that you would say necessarily, I want to keep my relationships, but what you might decide is, what do I want in those relationships? So, for example, going from I don't want to lose a relationship, you might say, well, what I want is love. What I want is connection. What I want is trust. What I want is friendship, etc., etc. So you might have a don't want that says, I don't want to lose money. Okay, well, what do you want? It doesn't necessarily have to translate right across the board into I want to make money, but it may be something like I want to be financially free. I want to be secure. I want to have the freedom to do what I want regardless of money. It could be something like that. If one of them is I don't want to be fat. So you go into a restaurant, you see all these things you like, but you think, oh, I don't want to eat that because I don't want to be fat. Well, then you're in this torture environment of I can't eat this, I can't eat that, I can't eat this, but I want them. Well, how would you turn that around? It wouldn't necessarily be I want to be fat, and it wouldn't necessarily be I want to be skinny, but maybe it'd be something like I want to be healthy. So then if you go to a restaurant that has all these tempting delights in there, you look at them and you can start to check in and say, does eating that support me in being healthy? And if the answer is no, well, rather than denying yourself something you want, you're saying no because it doesn't fit into where you're going. So as you start to turn these things around, coming up with different ways to approach it, not only are you shifting your mindset about it, you're shifting something inside of you to align with that mindset, so that instead of it being a denial or something that is torturous for you, as people go on diets and all they can think about is I can't wait till this diet's over so I can go pig out, it becomes something that becomes a part of you, so your shifts start to become naturally different. You start to naturally eat things that are different. Or you're going to start to naturally do things to support you in being financially free. You're going to start to do things that support you in having trust and love in your relationships. So that's what we're engaging in. So it's a very simple process, but the effects of it, the results of it could be very profound. So for the next 2 days, take a look at all the things that you look at that you don't want and pick out 10 to 15 of them that are really some of the big ones. If it's a thing of I don't want to go to McDonald's, maybe that's not that big of a deal in your life. But if it's something like I don't want to be alone, how would you turn that around? How would you shift that into a language that supports you? And I would invite you to look at it at a much deeper level than just, well, I want to have a lot of people in my life. But look at what do you want in those relationships with people? What would be the attributes you want in those relationships? Do you want love? Do you want trust? Do you want companionship? Do you want connection? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as you engage in this exercise for the next 2 days, realize what you're doing is you're working on shifting your language. And I would invite you to not discount the power of this. So as you look at this, it's a very simple exercise. Some of you have done this before, but whether you have or not, I invite you to take a look at it at a much deeper level. I've done this before, but I realize as I'm doing this online training, one of the hesitancies for me is this is very much outside of the realm of what I've done. I've usually worked with live audiences, which, as scary as it can be, it's actually a part of my comfort zone because I have a lot more control over the environment, a lot more control over where people are and ways to facilitate their shifts in life. Doing it something like this, it's going out to a large unknown. A lot of people are going to look at this, I don't even know. Well, as I'm pondering this, one of the things that came up for me was a little bit of fear. And I started to look at what that fear was about, started to realize that there's some don't want conversations going on inside of me. You see, these don't go away. These will not go away probably, but unless you have something to give yourself an alternative to, you can get stuck in those. Well, one of the things I didn't want, and I've always not wanted this, was I didn't want to be criticized. You know, to expose myself to thousands, if not millions of people, there's a risk involved in that, which we're going to talk about risk, by the way, in these videos. And anytime there's a risk, it entails the possibility of falling on our face, being hurt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I had this don't want to, I don't want to be criticized. Well, what do I do with that? If that's all I know and that's what's driving me, you're not seeing me right now. So I got to look and say, okay, how do I turn that around? What do I want? Well, I take a look at what is my purpose. My purpose is to challenge and inspire all to embrace and manifest their magnificence in light of who they are. And do I want to engage in that? Do I love saying that? Yeah. So that gets to be the focus. That other one is still there. So I get to enroll myself into that greater want of being a light and inspiration for people to shift their lives. If I didn't have that, I'm over selling tires or something like that. Nothing wrong with that, but that's not my passion and dream. So as you engage in this, give yourself permission to really look at this. Give yourself permission to really look at how you can turn those statements around. Not just to change the statement, but to give yourself a tool that when you find yourself in the don't want conversations, you can engage in a new conversation to give yourself the possibility of shift.